Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Text About It, a NAMI Talks podcast hosted by NAMI Maine's Teen Tech Support Line team. This podcast highlights the voices of young adults who work on the text line and support youth with mental health challenges. In each episode, we'll delve into the world of peer support, sharing firsthand experiences, insights, and resources to navigate life's challenges. This podcast may address sensitive topics like suicide or self harm. Please look out for your mental well being and seek support as needed. The Teen Text Line is open from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday and 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. The line can be reached at 207 515 8398 and is meant for people ages 13 to 23 who are looking for mental health support but are not experiencing a mental health crisis. I'm Grace, and today I'm joined by Alexia, Sarah, and Sydney to discuss body image and self-esteem. Before we get into it, I want to remind listeners that we are not medical professionals. If you are worried about your health or well-being, please reach out to a medical or mental health professional. With that, let's get started. So I want to start by asking everyone, anyone can start, what is body image or self-esteem and why is it important? Kind of getting us grounded in this topic.
I can start. So if I'll just introduce myself. My name is Alexia. I've been working on the teen text line for about a year and a half. And honestly, I think that body image is one of the most important things in mental health because I think whether you're a male or female or wherever you identify as, it affects everybody, not just mentally but physically. And I think that people forget how connected both are. Like, if you're not physically okay, sometimes you're not mentally okay and vice versa. So I think it's important because you live in your own body, and now there's social media, there's cameras, there's mirrors everywhere. And sometimes I think it's hard to avoid it. And you, like I said, live in your body all the time. So I feel like sometimes people run into the issue of there's no escape from it. So I think it's something kind of invasive at times. So I think it's very important in that way.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that, kind of in a broad way, body image is the way that you view yourself. But you raise a really great point about you live in your body all the time. Your body very much is your home. And so how you think about it can impact, obviously, how you feel about yourself, which then I think gets into self-esteem. Sydney or Sarah, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I like what Alexia brought up too. It's very like that is your home, and it's hard to like change. And if people are posting and stuff, then you kind of want to be like them and look like them, especially if you look up to them. So it can be really damaging to mental health too.
Yeah, I think just going off what like Alexia said about we live in our bodies, the body is sort of like the boundary between our internal selves and the external worlds. And so how we like portray ourselves and how we reflect our inner being is through our bodies. And I think because of that, we sort of, as a society, overvalue the body's importance and how we look and how we appear. And in the context of social media being added to that equation, it becomes like even more detrimental to our mental health because there's comparison added into the equation. And then I think like the beauty industry sort of takes advantage of that by associating like how you look with how you feel, and they sort of take advantage of our esteem issues and tell us like if we want to be happy we have to look good, and that sort of gets into like the whole consumerism side of body image. And yeah, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I mean, that leads us right to our next question of, why do you think so many people do struggle with body image and self-esteem, considering individual, familial, community, and societal factors? Sarah, you touched on a lot of them that we can go into a little bit deeper if you would want to continue.
Yeah, I think that those like spheres of influence sort of we internalize the messages that we get growing up about body and body image, and society sort of has this way of simplifying overly complicated messages. So on the one hand, we pathologize our bodies saying like, oh, if you have drastic weight fluctuations, then you've let yourself go. Or yeah, we sort of associate, sorry, I don't know where I was going with that, but we internalize those like messages we get growing up into black or white thinking, into like, if you're fat, then it's bad and you're lazy, and you associate it with all of these negative connotations, when in reality, that's just sort of what these spheres of influences have taught us growing up, and they're not necessarily true. That answers your question.
Yeah, definitely.
I definitely agree with what Sarah said. And it's really interesting to look at like the changes like thousands of years ago. If you were fat, you were seen as rich, or if you were bigger, you were looked up on because you knew what you were doing, you were rich, wealthy, whatever. But now it's like commercials will be like, oh, if you weigh like this much, then you should go on weight loss pills or watch your weight. And it's just so much is focused on like how to lose the weight, or you should look this way or that way. And it's just even like the beauty standards are like, in order to wear a bikini in the summer, you have to be this size or whatever. And it's very like exclusive, and it's very like, you have to look like this or else you're not pretty or you're not attractive.
Yeah. And I also think it's not even just the criticism that's, often is intentional by like commercials or ads or, influencing in other ways. But I think it's also yourself being your worst self-critic. Like, you set standards for yourself. I think it's like people go along with, societal views, and they really do take it to heart, and people don't realize that behind closed doors. And then at the end of the day, it's like, I've set these standards for myself. Like, this is what I want to look like. And then also not even taking into account how long progress like that truly does take. I mean, speaking from my own personal views, I've struggled with it probably like my entire life. And I mean, I've just kind of accepted that I'm at the point that, I might not ever be, totally happy with it, but, looking and saying, I have so many other things to be grateful for. Like, I'm in really good health. And that might not be super apparent on the outside, if I'm heavy or skinny or whatever. It's taking into account, like, I'm in good health right now. And that's what really matters. It's not appearance. It's what happens on the inside. My body's functioning well, no matter what it looks like, or what my face looks like, or other parts of my body, I'm healthy. And I think coming to that realization was one of the best things I did. And I would, really suggest thinking about that, because I think it, and it doesn't make it go away by any means. And there's days that it's worse, but I think coming to that realization as you mature and get older is something that is comforting, I would say. And there's just, and it comes to my mind too, like with social media, like I'm just as guilty as anyone else of like scrolling on social media and, getting that thing on TikTok where it's like, you need to take a break. You've been scrolling for too long. And I mean, I think people know what I'm talking about, but then I really realize how much, just stuff I'm taking in that's not even real. Like, it's on TikTok, it's on Instagram, like, it's not real. And I'm like sitting there comparing myself to like things that are most likely like photoshopped or not realistic. Like, the thing I think of the most was like what I eat in a day. Those are great to a certain point, but then it's like people don't realize that people are struggling with eating, or struggling with feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough because, I don't eat this and this and this every day like this person does, when they don't really, once again, take into account that, hey, maybe this is just one day out of 365 days in a year. They chose to film a video that, it might not be totally a reflection of what they do on a daily basis. And then I think, like Sarah and Sydney both said, it's the self-comparison and having to live with what you put in your body or the amount of activity that you do in a day. And I think it's just really all a big self-comparison. And I think it's hard when you don't meet your own standards, if that also makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. It does for sure. I think you all raise really great points. And kind of what you were getting at, I think, is the health at every size movement, which some doctors, nutritionists, providers are aligned with. I certainly am. You can't tell someone's health by looking at them, but a lot of people try. And yeah, I mean, your weight really does not necessarily equate with health, but that's just been so ingrained in the physical health, system. And I want to touch on a few things that were mentioned again. Sarah, you mentioned consumerism, which I have in our notes here. And I also kind of want to move slightly into how that relates to gender roles as well. But I also want to, I think, call out what I've seen a lot of rhetoric about online of the way that body types are trends. And different types of body types go in and out of popularity. What people consider attractive goes in and out, and so I think that just has a lot less value in society. Like, if something can go in and out of trend that easily, it's like, what does that mean about it? I think that it's like, why does that happen? It's just an interesting issue. And then, of course, the association of weight with someone's value, which I think we'll touch on a little bit later. But I also want to kind of mention a lot of fat phobia's roots in ableism and racism as well. If you think, different body types throughout the world, if you want to even go back as far as eugenics, not that eugenics are funny, obviously, but if you want to go, that far back, it's like people were looking at like which body type is most ideal. Sydney, as you mentioned, like this has been going on forever, and so yeah, I wanted to call attention to those things, but I am curious, and I want to kind of tie this into consumerism. Obviously, we are all women here on this podcast today. And so how do you think gender roles are related to body image?
I can start.
Yeah, please do.
I know the first thing that comes to mind is the thin ideal with women, and being smaller is seen as more like feminine almost. And there's a lot of like skinny privilege, I think is the term that's usually used. Towards people who are smaller and skinnier. And in consumerism, I think that this is really like taken advantage of because it's just something that the industry can promote easily. Sorry, I don't know really where I was going with that. What was the question again?
That's okay. No, I mean, I agree. Just kind of how gender roles are related to body image.
Yeah, just the thin ideal and skinny privilege, and especially women being seen as skinnier, they have a lot more advantages in society. But also males, I think that we forget that there are also male stereotypes with what's seen as more attractive, and you see like the fitness industry with males, especially in like weightlifting, and you have to be either like super bulky or you don't want to be like scrawny. There's certain stereotypes around that for males, and we sort of forget that body image is not just something females struggle with, it's also something males struggle with, but sort of disregard or hide because it's seen as stigmatized to them to sort of be insecure openly about their bodies. But yeah, I think that there's gender stereotypes for body image and how males and females want to look, and that sort of influences both males and females.
Yeah, I agree completely. I remember being in high school, and I was not in with the athletic crowd, but I had a friend that was, and I remember her telling me about like, because she helped out with the football team, and I remember her telling me just like comments that she would hear made by the football players in passing. And yeah, I think that male body image, male eating disorders are a very very overlooked topic. So maybe we'll have our male coworkers follow up on a podcast sometime, because I think it's extremely overlooked, and I think that it slips under the radar more because it's coded even heavier as like just like healthy practices. Meeting your macros and working out and all of these things. And then that can become just as obsessive as eating less and this and that. It's a whole other side of the coin. So I think you raise a really great point about that and the expectations, especially for young, like impressionable men that want to make the sports team, have older siblings, all those types of things. But and then along this vein also is kind of, I think, the idea that maybe we'd all agree on, that consumerism and a lot of companies sell the idea that like women need to like basically stop aging. Like get this cream so that you don't get wrinkles, like dye your hair, do all these things to stop yourself from aging. Whereas on the flip side, a lot of times men are praised for looking better when they get older. And so I'm interested in kind of, what have you guys heard, what do you think about that when it comes to kind of the way that products are really catered to women to change their bodies? And how do we kind of tune that out?
Yeah, I can kind of actually answer that a little bit from my own personal perspective.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, just to circle back, I was an athlete all of high school, middle school. I've done sports my whole life. And my sophomore year of high school, I tried out for my high school wrestling team. And that is one of the most eye-opening experiences that I have ever had with body image, weight, appearance, all of that. So I was one of a couple girls on a full squad of males wrestling team. And, I kind of thought, they've done this their whole life. Like, they know what they're doing. Like, this is easy for them. Being with them 7 days a week from morning till night, I realized, how much they struggle and how hard they are on themselves when they're like, oh, well, I went to practice, but I didn't have time to like lift today. And I'm like, well, it's fine. Like, you don't need to worry about that. They're like, well, no, I'm going to get worse. Like, it's just going to be a spiral. And I go, well, you've never said anything before. And they're like, well, like I have to make weight. I have to look a certain way for this weekend. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, and I never really took into account how much of a struggle it is, really. Like, and I mean, wrestling, it's a pretty common thing, and I've had to do it myself being on the team to make a certain weight and look a certain way, and there's, especially in sports, I think there's a lot of comments made. Sometimes, they're compliments and sometimes they're snarky remarks that are meant to be, kind of like a hidden remark sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, with my own experience wrestling, like, I lost like a ton of weight starting, and I was happy, but then I was like, all of this change kind of made me feel bad about what I looked like before starting, but then I also felt insecure in my own new way, if that makes any sort of sense. Like, I'm like, wow, I look a lot different, and it hasn't been a very long time. And then I started taking into account how unhealthy the choices I made were, because they were not my intentional changes. I'm gonna stop for just a second. But yeah, just to kind of, I guess, circle back, just the main thesis of what I'm trying to get across is, I think males, it's not common that you see a male actually talk about insecurities in general, whether it's appearance or weight or diet or it's hard to speak up, and it's like saddening that it has to be that way. And it's like seen as weakness. And it's actually to kind of make a point of our men's mental health podcast from last month, just to hear, people I know, and that I work with talk about like the struggles that they had. It's like, I wouldn't look at them and think that. And I think that's why mental health in general is just so hard. It's not something you always see physically. It's things that people hide, things that people don't want other people to know about them. So I think just to touch on, a male's perspective, it's obviously hard to talk about as a woman. But, I think that both struggle just as much, and sometimes it's more accepting and more apparent, and people are more apt to want to help women because they're, sometimes there's emotions with that and feelings and things that it, just reflects on from a woman's perspective. But with men, it's harder because they feel like they need to hide everything. So I think if in the future people can be a little bit more accepting of just everybody having body image struggles, people might feel a lot more willing to talk about it more.
Sarah, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think going off what Alexia said, it's pretty obvious that like females and their acceptance that body image struggles is more openly talked about than males, because something that's really sad is that this new movement to be more accepting of our body image is really directed towards females, because I think that there's this acknowledgement that females have for a long time been trying to like fix their body in a way that's physically and mentally detrimental. But with males, it's sort of seen as, oh, they're trying to like beef up and get stronger. So it's quote unquote healthy for them to try to fix their body. But when it becomes so obsessive, it's detrimental to their mental health. And we sort of disregard that as a society. But also just like what Alexia was saying about wrestling. One of my best friends in college was a wrestler. And I think that was the first time my eyes were really open to like how difficult it is for males, because he was so hard on himself and he would say the most like awful things to himself about his body. And I'm just like, I've never heard a guy talk about himself like that. But it was like so normal. And then I also worked in a gym before, and I remember like next to the desk there was a weighing scale, and all the guys, these were like middle school boys, would like gather around the weighing scale and weigh each other, and like sort of crack jokes at each other for their weight dropping or like drastically increasing. And it was just so normal to see that, or not normal for me, but for them it was just normalized, and like nobody said anything. But if a group of girls were to do that, we would, I think anybody who saw that would be very vocal. And it's just kind of upsetting that we only really, the like new movement to be more open to body image and health at every size is only really geared towards females. So yeah, just
I agree, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. So I want to move now a little bit more to kind of personal experience and kind of with an opening question. Sydney, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Yeah.
When did you become aware of your body or appearance?
I think definitely very early on, probably like as long as I could remember. 'Cause I've always had like a more like muscular build, not like just super, super skinny like a lot of my friends. And so I was super self-conscious. And I just remember growing up, going to the doctor, and they'd always tell me I was overweight. And I was also super, super tall for my age. Like when I was in 5th grade, I was 5'2". I mean, I still am, but um, as a kid, I was like tall, and that my doctors would tell me that I'm overweight and stuff, and I thought I was fine. And kind of going into like that changed how like I was growing up. I was kind of more conscious about it, and it would kind of be like, well, maybe I shouldn't eat this, or maybe I shouldn't do this. And I remember, because I've also always done sports, but I mean, still, if like genetically your body type is harder to change, like if your mom and grandmother are like that or whatever. So I remember one of my teammates' moms coming up on one of the tournament days, and I'd just gotten back from Subway and had like a whole foot long, and the mom was like, came up to my mom and said, "Do you even feed your daughter?" And I was like, "Oh, that hurt." And it was just because I was working out every single day. But like when I stopped working out, like for field hockey and the off season came, like, I gained more weight, and then I'd be harsh on myself for that. So it's kind of like a spiral of like just everything. And I think up until like recently, it took like a long time to just be okay with whatever my body is. And it's not like no one should be comparing themselves and being like, well, I want to look like this person because they're skinny or whatever. But it's crazy how like it's been since longer than I can remember that like thinking about body insecurities has been a thing just in general. So it's crazy how young it can start.
Absolutely. I want to mention something that impacted me and that I'm very actually interested in, just in general, getting back into media and consumerism seems to be my underlying theme today. But Barbie dolls, and all the different Disney cartoon films and everything. If you look at what body types are represented in the dolls, of which we start playing with at what, like as young as you can imagine,
Yeah.
you know, and then you start watching like Disney princess movies as a little kid, and it's like, how are different body types represented? I think a great example is Ariel. Ariel, well, she's a mermaid, so I guess we can start there. But she is thinner. And then if you think about, okay, well, who's the villain? Ursula, and she lives in a bigger body. And so you think about, how are body types portrayed to young children? And what do we then learn from that? And that again gets into the issue of representation. I think for children, especially in the early 2000s, which we all grew up in, I don't think there was much representation of bigger bodies in media or pop culture, which was then represented in like the dolls that were being made and the toys that we were playing with and the media we were consuming at such a young age. And I want to continue with what you said, Sydney, of going to the doctors. And then, like, I remember body image has been a big thing for me at a very young age. But I remember always being showed, like, the BMI chart of, like, where I should be and where I was. And I was, like, never where I should be. And it was just like, I'm too young for this. Like,
It's a lot.
I'm, like, 6, I'm, like, 7 or 8. It's like, I really shouldn't have to worry about these things right now. I should be able to have fun. But I think I was, like, aware of my body on, like, the playground in, like, kindergarten, and just how it was different. And so, yeah, I mean, it happened so young. Sarah or Alexia, was interested if you wanted to add on.
Yeah, I can, absolutely. But yeah, kind of tying back to like my own personal wrestling experience. Obviously it was an eye opener, but I struggled with that way before I even, was exposed to that. Like, I was a dancer for 8.5 years of my life. And now you look at like what is considered like a ballerina body type. And I know I can't be seen right now, but I'll let you know, I don't fit that stereotype, or perfectly anyways. So like thinking about that and being like having to look at myself in like a leotard and like be around other people in a leotard. Same thing, I did swimming and gymnastics, same, leotard type. And then I remember being on like a travel team for gymnastics, and they were saying how I had to wear a particular leotard that had a ridiculously high cut for my age. And, I was fine. I thought it was cool. I was like, yes, I'm getting new stuff. Like, this is great. And then my mom was like, that's like a lot, and other parents agreed. And I think it's like, then you start to be like, oh, well, is it like a bad thing? Like having like concerns, which I know it was like a lot, but it's just part of it. And I mean, now you look like with gymnasts wearing like really high cut leotards and having to talk about like gymnastics is another big one where it's like body type. And like, do you fit that, stereotype of what a gymnast or a ballerina or a swimmer, whatever, what they're supposed to look like. And it's like, if you don't, then you have to sit there and wonder, well, am I even supposed to do this? Like, maybe I'm not even meant to participate in this. And another thing from wrestling was I remember like, it's a winter sport. So it runs like, through the holidays, which is normally when a lot of feasts and dinners and, of the sorts. And I remember I went to a friend's house and I said, I'm just letting you know, like, I'm here, but I'm not here to like eat. And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, I can't have Thanksgiving food. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I can't have Thanksgiving food. It's too heavy. And I just remember she looked at me and she's like, that's not a thing. And I'm like, well, I have to live with it for now. Or like, it's, I can't. And, I had a little bit. She convinced me to have a little bit, but it wasn't a lot. It's like, now there's the stereotype within the wrestling community of like, you can't have Thanksgiving dinner. You can't share a Thanksgiving dinner with your loved ones because you can't eat too much or way too much. Or if you do, then you have to do it in an unhealthy way and lose the weight before you have to wrestle again. you know, and like it's everywhere within sports. You know, like I think of another thing, you know, everyone dreads phys ed, you know.
I'm going to get into that later, so you continue, because I have
Yeah.
plenty to say.
Yeah, like, you know, physical education, you know, I'll kind of let you take that over, but
Don't
oh
worry
my
about it.
gosh, no, phys ed, it's like you have to pass all these tests to be considered, you know, amazing, or like in shape, or like your measurements fit the quote normal range for your age, but it doesn't take into consideration things like height or other outside, you know, times of exercise or anything like that. And it's just like, why don't we do that? You know, it's crazy to me sometimes. And like, I mean, you also talking about body types again, you know, like I've been told that I look overweight, and then I lost a bunch of weight, and then I was too skinny. And then I'm at the weight I am now. And then like I'll have people come up to me and be like, you have a Pixar mom body type. And I'm like, what does
Me
that
too.
even mean? Like,
It's
what does that
weird.
even mean? You know, I'm like, what? That sounds crazy. Like a Pixar mom body type. Where did we even get that from? You know, like that's so, it's just interesting that we're taking like, you know, like somewhat like innocent, you know, movies with like a fun message, and like it's like a family movie, and we're turning it into something related to body type or appearance. You know, it's just stuff that goes down to that, kind of like what you said, Grace, about like movies. Like, what do these characters look like? Does it have a hidden message that people don't understand? And I think that's just like, you know, shape and size is everywhere, and just the comparison is, you know, I think it's really crazy sometimes until I hear people say these things, and I'm like, what does that even mean, you know?
Yeah, you mentioned so many things I wanted to comment on, but I guess I'm going to continue with the word comment, which is that people feel inclined to comment on your body and what you eat. I think that is a statement everyone can agree with. For some reason, somewhere down the line, it was like okay to comment on someone on what someone eats, and to comment on what someone looks like. And I really like the saying of like, don't comment on anything that someone couldn't change in like 5 seconds. Sometimes I think just don't comment on anything. Like maybe let's just not comment on anything. Maybe hair, okay, maybe the outfit, maybe jewelry. But aside from that, it's like let's just leave comments alone. And then I want to get back to kind of gender roles, with what you were talking about with the Thanksgiving meal. I think obviously I'm an only child, not obviously, but I'm an only child. And so I didn't grow up with siblings. But I think you know, I see portrayed a lot in movies and things like that. I hear from some friends that girls that grew up with brothers, oftentimes like eating a lot was encouraged for the brother, whereas like if a girl went back for seconds, it was like no, it was like, oh, you know, he's a growing boy, whereas the girl is like, no, 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 you're not allowed to grow, you're not allowed to take up space. And so I think that is a really important topic to touch on. But Sarah, I want to give you some time to kind of talk about when you became aware of your body before I launch into my rant about gym class.
Yeah. First of all, I loved what you both said about like these messages you had growing up with Alexia and Sydney. We're under like the athletic community, and sort of these spheres of influence all sort of give us these subconscious messages, and we sort of conflate them and simplify them in our heads to associating skinny with good and fat with bad. Like you said about like Ursula was the bad guy and she was fat and or bigger. And then Ariel, the skinny girl, was good. And then again, all these messages around health and how we should look and what we should eat and what we should wear sort of influence us, and we don't realize it. We sort of just like subconsciously bury it, and as a result, we sort of tie in the value of our appearance with our weight, with like our character, I guess. So yeah, just like sort of those messages we get growing up really impact us in a way that we don't often recognize, and sort of tie in those two things together. But going back to your question about when I first became aware of my own body, um, I have a twin sister. So I think growing up, I was surrounded by a lot of family who would make sort of comments and try to differentiate us by saying like, oh, Hannah's or my sister's the skinny one, and I'm the boyish one, the athletic one. And so to sort of hold up that value, or be okay being bigger, I had to live up to being the athletic one. Or but yeah, just growing up, I was really exposed to that comparison, not through social media, but directly with my twin sister. And so I felt like a lot of pressure to look a certain way and be a certain way in order to be accepted in a larger body than my sister, I think. And I think a lot of it was just internalized beliefs around what I was raised with, like Disney Channel movies around who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, and messages I had around, like, from my family and from my um, peers and from social media and from coaches. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you raise really great points, and I think we're going to delve a little bit more into social media in a few minutes. But I want to get a little bit further into kind of what I was discussing earlier, what we were kind of mentioning about the not gym yet. I'll get there, I promise. But about the doctor's office, actually. So I live in and grew up in a bigger body, and the doctor's was like a very traumatic place for me. Like, not only was I shown the BMI chart, but I don't think I went like a single like physical checkup without my weight being a topic of conversation until maybe like a couple years ago, when I finally was able to like shut those conversations down. And so yeah, I mean, I just learned it was almost and again, doctors do what they can with the information that they have. But it almost, when I was younger, it almost kind of felt like scare tactics. It's like people were talking about like heart conditions and diabetes to me from such a young age, of which I have neither. And but I was so young and I got so afraid. And so it's like, how am I then supposed to have any positive relationship with my body when I feel like it's so wrong? And so, yeah, doctor's office is a really, really not a good place for me. And I remember I would go and I would fill out the survey paper before each of my yearly physicals. It'd always be like, do you eat a healthy diet? And I'd sit there and I'd be like, every single time I'd circle, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? Like, that is so different for everyone. It would be like, are you getting this amount of exercise? And each time I had to put no, because I didn't like sports. And I didn't like sports because I felt like I wasn't allowed to participate in them because of the body I live in. And so it's just like at such a young age, I was forced to analyze all of these things so closely and think about all these things so closely. And so to other people out there that are either going through that with their doctors now or grew up like that, again, we'll get into this later, but it's okay to stand up for yourself, even if you cry, because I cried every time. And it's okay to be like, I don't want to be weighed at this appointment. And I want to get into that more later. But I just wanted to mention that, again, the issue of health and weight being tied with a nice little ribbon together, where in reality that's not the truth. Did you want to add something, Sydney?
Yeah, I just want to, that reminds me of, so this February I changed to a new doctor, finally out of pediatrics, woohoo. So I got a new doctor and he was not very understanding. And it was just, I remember coming home from that and I just felt like I just wanted to peel off my skin. Yeah. I just didn't like how, and I usually prefer female doctors because they just understand more, and I have like a larger build, like I have wide hips, larger legs, like, and my doctor did not seem to understand, like, he was just like, well, you're pretty overweight, but it's not very proportionate. And I was just like, oh, and it's just the comments that he made were just so uncomforting. And I mean, I've always struggled with like body image and stuff, and especially having like a larger build on bottom, like with just wide hips and just in general having that like like Alexia said, like the Pixar mom build. Like people are
Pear shape. People, we
Yes.
love to be
We love to
defined.
label it.
We love to be defined by the fruits. We have the apple shape, the pear shape. Well, I guess this isn't a fruit. The hourglass, the rectangle, the triangle. Because all women's body types can be defined by just those ones, right? Everybody. This is sarcastic. In case that wasn't okay. Never mind. Continue, please.
I just remember feeling like, and even this was in February, so this was a couple months ago. I remember like texting my boyfriend, just kind of saying like, that made me so uncomfortable. And every time I try to stand up for myself, he'd shut it down and just be like, well, no, you need to be healthier. You are not healthy. And he hadn't even like taken my vitals yet or anything. So he was just kind of basing everything off of my appearance. And I mean, it was just like, I wanted to peel off my skin, and I just like got back in the car and cried. And I hate going to the doctors anyway because I get really, really anxious because every time they just tell me I'm overweight, I need to go on a diet, exercise more, and I exercise, like I like to walk and do yoga and stuff. I mean, it may not be running and lifting heavy weights, but I mean, I'm active. I try to eat better, but it's like I think a lot of people also shame for, if you have a couple Doritos or something, then you're going to be fat. And a lot of people like to judge or, if you are like, you know what, I want a bowl of ice cream. People are like, well, it's going to make you gain 10 pounds. And it's just like the relationship with food too is just, some people are just like, well, if you don't eat something healthy, you're going to be larger. Or like they don't understand the moderation of things. And that's also damaging because, sometimes I'm like, you know what, I want to have a cheat day or something. And I'm fine with that until people are like, well, that's probably not good. Don't do that. So like even that is damaging. And like going to the doctors, they're like, well, what's your healthy diet look like? I'm like, well, I really don't know. I mean, it's not that I don't eat fruit. I really love fruit, but I don't only eat fruit all day, every day. I'd be pretty hungry if that was the case, but
Yeah, and I wanna just mention the idea of a cheat day.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too.
Yeah, like what even is that?
I don't even know. I mean, just people
exactly.
say that like,
yeah,
oh, you
no,
eat that.
and I know
Yeah.
people say that, and so it's like this verbiage, this lingo gets picked up, and we just use it. And we don't really know what it means. And everyone's diet is so unique to them. And, again, it's that commentary that we then absorb and take on. And so, yeah, it's like, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean to, like, you're cheating on a partner is one thing. Cheating on a diet, it's like, what are you betraying your diet?
Right.
It's like, what even is that? What does that mean? So yeah, I'm glad you brought that idea up because it's so rooted again in what is good and what is bad. Sarah, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's just like when you said cheat day, it's like you're almost like you feel this need to defend your diet. And I think like we're saying like you go to the doctor and you're like, you need to start this diet, but there's so many fad diets out there. And like all of this sort of falls under the purview of diet culture. And the fact that our media and social media is so flooded with that it's become so normalized that like a cheat day is just everybody knows what you're talking about. But like, what is a cheat day? That's just, there's no definition because every diet is different. So cheating for your diet might not be cheating for another person's diet. And so I don't know, but yeah.
Absolutely. All right, we can move on to our next question, which goes along with that. How has social media impacted your self-esteem? And similarly, how has comparison impacted you and also your relationships with others?
I can kind of speak on that question about the social media. I think, just sitting here listening to everyone else talking about size, but I think we kind of got off course about appearance in the face. What is acceptable? What is a good-looking face to somebody? Which I don't think there's any such thing because all over the world there are normal things within culture. There's normal things within, things that come, from when you're born, like in certain cultures, like a big nose is great, or a small nose is great, or long hair is good, or short hair is good, like it's so globally different. And talking about another personal experience of mine, I could talk about it all day, but, I went to the nail salon right before a trip of mine. I wanted to get all like glammed up and I was like, super excited. And I was getting my manicure done and my pedicure done. And I said, could I not have lotion? And she's like, why? Like, don't you want like a lotion massage? And I go, well, I'm going to get a spray tan after this because I look, really like pasty and, like ghostly and like not good looking. And she's like, what are you talking about? You look great. And I'm like, no, wrong. Like, I don't. And she's like, well, in my culture, like paler skin is what everyone wants. Like you could, be on the cover of a magazine. Like your skin looks great. You don't need a spray tan. And I'm like, oh, I'm still going to get the spray tan. But, like I never thought about that. I'm like, it's just so different. Like, and another thing that I just think of is acne is such a big thing. And I, kind of like looked over it for a moment and I'm like, I've struggled with acne and so has a lot of other people. And then it's like the stereotype, like, oh, if you have acne, like you don't wash your face, you're dirty, like take a shower, like, use a bar of soap, and even in my family, like my older brothers struggled with acne really bad. They were all athletes, like, linemen, like they got sweaty and, and they had a lot of acne and, people were like, oh, use a bar of soap. Like, please wash your face. Like, that's really gross. And I'm like, well, they can't control that, just as much as like, with my own anxiety, like I get stressed out one day and I wake up the next morning with a great big zit on my face. I can't control that. And people don't take into account, things can happen overnight, certain skin disorders. People are like, well, please contact your dermatologist because that's gross. I don't want to look at that. And I'm like, that is so far out of their control and you don't know what other struggles, or like scars is another one. People are like, oh, I have to cover my scars. Well, why? You don't. Like, that's part of your story. Like, you don't have to be ashamed of that. So I think with social media, I would say, I mean, I've seen a little bit, but I just don't know how true it is of like encouragement of being, body positive. And it's just like people feel like they have to get a nose job. And I think, that's like a whole other tangent of like surgeries or cosmetic surgeries that have to be done to fix these things. So that way they can be seen differently. And I think that, I actually saw this documentary once again on social media because it interested me, of the doctor was asking, well, why do you want to get this done? Is this for like reasons of like medical reasons or is it because of your appearance? And they were like, well, I just want to appear better to, the, society. And it wasn't because of themselves. It was because they had to fill that need of impressing everyone around them. And it's just like saddening, I think, that people have to feel that way, whether it's acne or body type or size. And, another thing that I think about too, that, Sydney brought up with like the, body type of like, isn't it funny to think like for this amount of time, this body type is like, you're like, right on, you're like, oh, you're perfect. Like, you're like the ideal body type for everyone. So like in the summer, it's like, oh, if you have that like perfect like bikini body type, like beach body type, like you're in good shape. And then it's like, winter rolls around and you wear baggy clothes and then you look different. And then like that's not impressive anymore to say, to say.
And again, like what is a bikini body?
Right, exactly.
A bikini body is something that companies want you to. Actually, you know what? It's quite counterintuitive to companies.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then other people aren't going to buy it. You know what? Never mind.
Yeah.
Scratch that.
No, but you do. I think you do have a point though.
Yeah.
Of like, because, people are like, oh, if I get this medicine or if I get this shirt.
That's a good point.
Or
right.
these, like you go on TikTok and people are like, oh, I just bought this bodysuit and it sucks in all my stomach fat and makes me look slim. And so I think you do have a point with that of like, this is what's portrayed as that body type and this product or this food or this, it's going to get rid of it. And then when it doesn't, people feel hopeless and they just get worse is because they're like, oh, well, there's something wrong with me because it didn't work.
Yeah.
And it's that disappointment and that consumerism of, if I, eat this fruit, for 72 days and 6 hours and 12 minutes that I'm going to look like this when I'm done.
Yeah.
And they set that expectation. And then there's that, work that goes into it. But then, in reflection, that disappointment of if it doesn't look exactly how, person B or C or D looked like they said.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you definitely did have a point with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think as the youth or as the Teen Text podcast, we do have a responsibility to be up with the trends. And Alexia, as you were saying earlier, maybe you were referencing the facial harmony trend on TikTok right now. Or does your face have harmony or not?
Yes. No, and then you look in the comments and people just get ripped apart. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my gosh, like let it go. Like compliment them. Be like, you have really pretty eyes. Instead of, nope, your harmony doesn't line up. Like, sorry, take this down. Like, no. Like,
and then a lot of people argue in social media comments about like, if someone's like, oh yeah, I have a mid-sized body, like, you're not mid-sized. Yeah. It's like
go down to your hair.
Yeah.
This isn't curly hair. That's wavy hair.
Yes.
Like let them have their moment. They're trying to show you what products they use and have fun. Like it's not that serious, I feel.
Yes. All right. Sarah, Sydney, sorry, did you want to add something?
No, you're good. I know that I've always been like, like growing up, like, well, when I was really young, like I didn't even have a phone. I was just outside all the time. That stuff didn't matter. But like, when I started getting into school and stuff, especially middle school, like Instagram and all that stuff was a big thing. And like, what is that app? Like Visco, something like that. I deleted all of those because it was awful. I think in high school I deleted them. And kind of like I have Facebook because that's how I talk to some of my family members, but I had to filter it because so many people are just like, editing their photos. They're like, you have to look like this or like this. And or like on TikTok, a lot of people for a while were just like, oh, like, look how skinny you can get if you use this product. And I'm like, you know what? I just want dogs on my For You page. So it's like, it's crazy how much, social media like will influence people. And like, I kind of had to change my mindset because like, I mean, I can't just always get dogs and cats. Sometimes it's like, oh, do this to your body. Or, like, if your body doesn't look like this, then you're ugly or whatever. And I had to kind of change my mindset. Like, they don't know me. They don't know anything about me. And just changing, like, how much I care about what people think of me. Like, some days I do feel, like, yucky in my body. But, that's when I just, like, take a little break day. And I'm just like, well, I'm going to just lay down and not do much for the day so I don't think about it. And, like, even, like, sometimes I'll tell my boyfriend, I'm like, I feel yucky today. And he'll kind of, like, give me compliments. And I'm like, I do appreciate that. Hearing from someone else, like, oh, no, you do look good. It's just, like, such a huge change, which is awful. It shouldn't be, like, one compliment shouldn't be like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Like, because there's just so much negativity and, like, judgment on so many other people when they don't even have, like, they don't know anything about me. They don't have room to talk about any of that for anyone.
Yeah, one comment can really make or break your day, and
Absolutely.
It's quite sad. It's normal though, It's like anyone out there that feels that way, like that's normal. But It's not. When I said it's sad, it's not sad that it happened. It's not sad that you feel that way. It's sad that it has to happen. It's like, yeah. Anyway, Sarah, save me from going deeper into a hole.
No, I like what you guys were saying about how like consumerism sort of associates, takes advantage of like our body image concerns and says like, if you change how you look, then you'll feel better about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of where the different movements between like body neutrality versus body positivity comes in, because a lot of like health products tell you that if you fix how you look, then you'll be happy. Yep. And so you're immediately like drawn into that product. And that's how social media like captures your attention. It's because you want to ultimately be happy. It's not necessarily that you want to change how you look, but our society teaches us that the two things are inherently tied together. To be happy, you have to look good for society so that you could feel like you fit in, I guess. But it's not necessarily like, that's not a fact. Like how you look doesn't have to influence how you feel,
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to move forward in just a minute talking about kind of what shows up on the text line for us when we're talking to people. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about comparison and body image and its impact on relationships in my life, especially growing up and sometimes still even now. But again, growing up in a bigger body, not being very athletic, the people around me, my body type wasn't really reflected, and oftentimes, I had a hard time socially, sometimes growing up, just kind of in and out of some friend groups, not really feeling too close to anyone, and I often thought it was because of how I looked. That was the main thing, and whenever I had friends kind of maybe leave me or become closer with someone else, or when I wasn't invited out, I was like, oh, it must be because of my body. And that's such a horrible thing to feel and to think. And some things that like middle schoolers and high schoolers really like to do is go to the mall and go shopping. And I like never wanted to do that because I would go shopping and like I wouldn't want to try things on in front of someone. And I was just always embarrassed. And so I definitely think that the way I view my body has had impacts on me socially, for sure, which is really challenging. And the things that I've pursued, even if I wanted to, I felt like I didn't want to be seen necessarily. So I wanted to add that. But let's move into how body image has shown up on the line. A lot of things are obviously quite similar to what we've talked about. But we talked to a lot of people dealing with puberty. I said that so strangely. Puberty, and bodily changes, being exposed in gym class or camp, social media, and then kind of as I was discussing relationships, romantic relationships, and family members commenting on body types and appearance. And I guess I've waited long enough that I shall share my gym story now. Because all of you out there that have texted us that don't like gym class because of body image or this and that, I just want to let you know that you are so not alone. I despised it. In elementary school, I threw up before every single gym class because I was so anxious, because everyone else was more athletic. I didn't have much confidence in myself, so maybe I could have been cool or not cool. Maybe I could have been fast, and but I didn't even think it was just out of the cards for me. So I was just so anxious, and I missed so much school. And in middle school, I hated it. And whenever we would play like dodgeball, I just wanted to be hit first so that I could sit and watch. Like I just didn't want to participate. And then when I reached high school, things kind of really came to a head because we were going to have to swim. And I was like, I cannot do this. I just cannot do this. And so, I won't get into the gritty details, but I did get out of gym class because just the distress that it was causing me was impacting my ability to access my education. And I had gym teachers be like, you can do it, you can do it. And I was like, you don't get it. You just don't get it. And so, yeah, I really, really want to normalize for people out there that struggle with gym class at school. Like, it's normal and it's okay. And you're so not alone in those challenges, and it's not weird. And you're also like, I feel like in movies and media, there's always that like image of like the nerdy kid getting hit with the ball in dodgeball. And you know what? That was me. And we all have our strengths, we all have our challenges, but we shouldn't be forced to feel humiliated. The number one, that young, and number two, in a place that's supposed to be a safe learning environment. So that is my gym story. That did end up working out in my favor, but I really, really had to fight for it.
Yeah, I can think of a gym story too. I also had a swim unit, so I'm glad to hear that I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear I wasn't the only one
Mm.
that had to do an
Well,
entire.
I didn't do it, so.
Yeah, I did. I'm super competitive, so I ate that up. I'm like, yeah, we're gonna race, and it's gonna be great, and I'm gonna win, and
Mhm.
whatever. But I had a friend group that was the opposite. Like I was the ambitious one. I'm like, yep, race me, I dare you. Like I'm gonna win. And was that my best moment? No, because maybe I didn't take into account that, other people were like not there for that reason.
Right.
I took it in as like, oh, this is super fun, this is great. But I had friends in my friend group that sat out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were punished for that.
Yep.
They got attendance points taken off.
Yep.
They received a 0, and they had to keep, until something was said, to keep retaking the class until they swam.
Yep.
They had to be forced to swim. And I'm like, that is not okay.
Yeah.
That like they're expressing that this is out of their comfort zone. And it might not even be anything related to body image, but someone might have had a traumatic experience with swimming or something that, triggered that, I'm not doing it.
Yep.
So I'm glad that you brought that up because, if you're struggling with that, stand up for yourself. Don't feel like you have to put your education or your grades or, your comfort at jeopardy. Just stick up for yourself. You don't have to do that. Or another thing is depend on others. Like I was one of those people. I was excited to swim for a while, and then I, as I watched other people become uncomfortable, I got over it too. Like I was like, yeah, maybe this isn't as fun. Like lean on your friends and talk to those people that are there and find comfort in that.
Mm-hmm. Sarah and Sydney, I'm curious about kind of conversations that you guys have had on the line. Sarah, do you want to start?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, hearing that story, first of all, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I think it just goes to show that, like, fat phobia in our society is used as a sort of manipulation technique and scare tactic. And it's not just in the doctor's office, it's also in
You're good. Keep going.
but yeah, it's also at schools, and I didn't realize how like widespread that sort of scare tactic is used in society. But yeah, that's all. Oh, sorry, what was the original question?
Oh, that's okay. Just kind of what conversations have we had on the text line?
Oh, yeah, definitely the gym conversation. A lot of stuff about like puberty and going through those changes, and I think that's pretty normal because your body is going through such drastic changes. So your attention is drawn towards these changes and you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? It can be confusing. And living in a society that's very, what's the word, fast paced and urgency driven. It's like, if something changes drastically, you need to fix it drastically. And it's like, we live in a society where if it's something seems wrong, you got to fix it like immediately. You can't just sort of sit with it and like feel it out sort of. And I think that sort of teaches teenagers going through puberty that they need to fix whatever is happening to their bodies to fit whatever is happening to their peers' bodies. So there's sort of like, there becomes this dynamic between like what's normal and what's not normal. And puberty, I don't think there is exactly like one normal, everybody is different. So, and that's something that I think we have to just explain on the line a lot, which is something that should be explained in like health class, but I guess it's not really as much as it should be. So,
yeah. Sydney, what are some topics you've talked about with people?
One that stands out is definitely people who fear that they like they weigh too much, or they like just feel like they're larger, and they're like, maybe I should just stop eating for a couple days. And I've had that come up a couple times, and like obviously we're not doctors, and we can't be like, oh yeah, sure, maybe that'll work. Like that's not a healthy way. So like kind of suggesting that they see a doctor, but then like it's like a circle of like, well, some people also don't want to go to the doctor, and the doctor's also going to do that. But like, I think that's definitely a challenge, being like, you should go see someone professionally trained in that, because we are not. But then the professionals are kind of very stigmatizing too. So it's like, it's just like a circle of that.
Yeah, we have had a fair amount of people reach out to us um, about their diet and about restrictive eating, and they are hard conversations for us to navigate because of the fact that we aren't able to diagnose or really treat. Please reach out to us, and we'll figure out a way to kind of have a conversation, talk a little bit about self-esteem, talk about values, talk about safe people you can connect with to have that conversation with. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, just circling back, it just shows how pervasive of an issue this is. Um, and so, yeah, if it's all right, I think I'll move on, kind of get us sort of wrapped up soon. And talking a little bit about what are some, we talked all about the challenging things. So let's move into what are some of the helpful things that you've done or learned about to improve your body image. And Sarah, may I start with you?
Yeah, sure. So, um, I would say that a lot of mindset shifts was
Mm-hmm.
one thing. And then I think questioning sort of what the underlying factors were in
Mm-hmm.
my body image struggles. So a lot of the times we don't realize, but the ideal body that we want isn't, it's not necessarily the body, it's the emotional experience we'll get from that. So
100%.
for me, yeah, for me, like what you said about feeling like you could fit in and stuff, for me, it was like, I don't think it was that I wanted a certain body. It was that I thought when I reached that body, I would be seen. I would felt, not rejected. Um, I would feel a certain way. And that's sort of what I was seeking, and noticing that that's what my emotional need was, and not necessarily a body change, was a huge turning point for me, because there are other ways to obtain those needs, like feeling accepted, other than changing how you look. And then a lot of it was a lot like acceptance that bodies change over time, and that's so normal. Like change is a part of life. Everybody does it. And then change in like generational beauty standards is normal too. You see it there. So it's like, as a control freak, I think a lot of the times I try to like fix the problem before it even came, but accepting that like change can't really be like predicted was another huge part. Um, and then a lot of like reappraisals, diversifying my social media content, um, practicing some cognitive flexibility around like perception versus reality and mind reading, and all these what thinking traps that I know I talk about a lot with you guys.
Mm.
But yeah, that's really how I worked on it for myself, and sort of what I try to encourage people who text in to think more deeply about. And then this one question, this is sort of unrelated, but I recently asked myself this and I thought it was kind of helpful. But like, who, or somebody asked me this, who is a celebrity who has the same body type as you? And what do you find beautiful in them? And then I realized like what was coming up was not visual aspects. It was like, what do I find beautiful in them? And it mostly had to do with like their character traits and their like artistic abilities and their values and stuff like that. And it wasn't necessarily like body image. And it sort of draws your attention towards like how, like I think Alexia said at the very beginning, we are our biggest critics, and we sort of draw our attention towards the worst things we can think about ourselves, when other people don't really look at that. They're not really focused on that. They're more focused on, your character, who you are as a person, and not necessarily how you look. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you raised some really great points, and that idea. There are a lot of people that drastically change their bodies and then still don't feel good about themselves. And so you raised an excellent point that I totally forgot to bring up. Is that, yeah, it's more a feeling that you're chasing rather than a body type, maybe. And a lot of the things you've done, I have aimed to do as well. Certainly, social media is one of the biggest things. I have blocked a lot of accounts, and it has been quite wonderful. Anything that pops up and then makes me feel bad about myself, I'm like, you know what? I don't need to engage with this. I don't need to see this. Absolutely diversifying my social media following more people that look like me or talk about body image in a positive way has been really helpful. And then having compassion for myself, which is quite difficult, but kind of grounding in the idea that we do live in a society that places so much emphasis on our bodies. So, of course, it's hard for me to escape that. And like, this is not my fault. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. That's been a big thing. And then also boundaries, which are really hard, but we talk about them a lot on the line. We can help you set them. We can talk about the discomfort with setting them, but leaving conversations that are upsetting, asking again to not be weighed at the doctor's office, shutting down comments about what you look like or what you're eating. I've tried my best to really do all of those things, and I found that helpful. If I notice that I'm in a conversation with someone and it turns to like the calories in the food, or the amount of exercise you get, I stop and I say, how did we get here? How did we get here? I don't want to talk about this. Like, I don't think this is necessary. Obviously it's easier said than done because you don't know how that person's going to react to that boundary that you're setting, but I've done the best that I can with that. And then also affirmations. A lot of people put affirmations on their mirror, or on their phone. Maybe even having a picture of your younger self, and remembering that that's who you're talking to. But affirmations, a lot of the time, that have nothing to do with what I look like, can be really helpful. Sydney, what are some things you've done to kind of be more comfortable in yourself?
Definitely kind of a mix of what both of you guys just said.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the boundary of if making my social media customized to me. Even though I've known this person since I was younger, if they're not good for my mental health, and block them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really hard too. But I mean, I've pretty much if there's any media or anything that made me feel uncomfortable or just kind of self-conscious about myself, I was like, my account is in my hands. I can just block them and not and even there are some ads that are like, oh, what about these weight loss pills? I'm like, not interested. Don't want to see this.
Yep.
And so that definitely helped me a lot and kind of changing the way that I think about things. And I worked in therapy with this too, of just changing my thoughts, like what Sarah was saying, and kind of not really caring as much what other people think, which is so much easier said than done. But my cousin and I have extremely similar builds, and we have had the same struggles, so it helps to talk to her. And she's 4 years younger than me too, so people commenting even on her body is just it's crazy the amount that people just will draw attention to your body. But I think with us both going through similar struggles and views of our own bodies has definitely helped a little bit talking to each other. And she's also pretty open-minded. She'll be like, this old guy commented on my body or something. I'm like, I've had the similar thing, and it's weird. And we just kind of rant about it, talk about it, and it feels better. And it's just there's no need for these people. For some reason, for me, it's usually always old men, which is so weird. I've gotten asked oh, are you a soccer player? I'm like, no, why? He's like this old man was just well, you have very large and muscular legs. I'm like, maybe don't look at my legs. What do you want for food today? Because I was serving him, and he's like, I just gotta say, you look like a soccer player. I'm like, all right, interesting. And I was I think I was 14 when that happened too. So it's crazy. Just so kind of just shifting my thoughts and being I don't really care. That guy doesn't know me at all, clearly. I don't really care as much. I'll tell someone, I'm like, oh, haha, this happened, and have a laugh about it, and kind of make it more lighthearted instead of internalizing that and, taking it more of as a dart. I'm usually I'll talk to my cousin and be like, oh, haha, this happened. How weird is that? And it just kind of makes me feel better because I'm not internalizing it and being like, oh, this guy thought I was fat or something. Because I am definitely my own worst critic a lot of the time. So reframing the the thing I control most, which is my brain and how I think, was definitely a huge step.
Absolutely. Alexia, bring us home.
All right, I'll bring it out. So
Thank you.
I think that overall, I'll kind of recircle back to the thing that I said first, which I think, in my own opinion, is the most important, is self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Please remember what you can and can't control.
Mm-hmm.
You can't control if an old man walks up to you and tells you that you look like a soccer player. You can't control, always what pops up on your feed. You can't control the emotions and anger that people take out on you just to feel better about themselves. And I just think of times where people will be like, oh, did you see her outfit? It looked so bad. Or did you see her shoes untied? And I'm like, no, I didn't, because I was listening to the message they were telling me. I wasn't looking at that. And I think in return, I've also heard that from so many other people they're like, oh, I look so bad today. Oh my gosh. And I guarantee you, if you asked that person that you thought that you looked bad, they wouldn't even remember. They wouldn't remember what you were wearing. They wouldn't remember what, if you had like a booger in your nose or whatever. They wouldn't remember that. You know what I mean? Or like, and kind of the good part of social media is like, using it as like to be relatable of like, oh my gosh, like I know like a couple months ago I saw a TikTok that, it made me feel refreshed of like when you're at the beach, you're one of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Do you think that all of those 1,000 people remembered what your hair color was or what you looked like or what bathing suit you were wearing? No, they don't remember that. So don't use yourself as a human punching bag. Don't use yourself as a human target, because I guarantee you that, there might be a couple people out there who are, just as insecure. And the reason that they're saying those things is not to tear you down. It's to make themselves feel better, because they're also lacking that confidence. They're feeling insecure. And in return to that, don't respond in anger all the time. Be patient with yourself. You never know. And sometimes the wrong thing to do is to react in the same manner that someone has reacted to you. Yeah. And that's taken a long time to realize. So I would just say, think about yourself and put your needs first. If you need to talk to somebody, assess who, and this is also something we do on the line all the time, is assess who you have in your life. Who is that one person that you go to? Yeah. Talk to them. If they aren't available, who's the next person to talk to? Get the help you need, and do not deprive yourself of your needs, no matter what it is, whether it's, body image or, bodily changes or things that you need to talk about. Don't ever hesitate to reach out. And that's why the text line is here. That's exactly its purpose. So, make the best of your resources, but just put your needs first.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to make our closing statement, if that's all right with everyone. I think, as we mentioned earlier, maybe don't comment on what people look like. Don't comment on what people eat. Don't comment on their exercise. And something that I think is an important reminder for myself and everyone is that fat is not a bad word. And I think that it's often treated as a really bad word because it's something that people don't want to be. But in reality, it's not a bad word, and it's okay if you are. And yeah, it's quite a journey. And I feel like, loving yourself and your body is very much an uphill battle. And I think that is all we have for today. So, yeah, that's all for this episode of Let's Text About It. Make sure to subscribe to NAMI Talks wherever you get your podcasts. And if you liked this episode, make sure to like and share. Thank you for listening, and we hope you tune into our next episode. Bye, everyone.